What's up everybody? Nate here. So the United States has gone through a complete labor shift over the last 2 years. You've had millions of Americans voluntarily quitting their jobs, and then millions more shifting from the office to a remote work life. But ever since the start of 2022, many companies all throughout the United States are starting to make people go back into the office. And it appears as if the Great Resignation gap is starting to close in a little bit, as more and more Americans are starting to become employed again. So this all begs the question, is labor in the United States going back to business as usual? Or are we going to continue to see shifts in 2022 and beyond? And is the Great Resignation essentially flipping on its side? Well, today we're going to be discussing all of that and more, so be sure to stick around till the very end of this video to learn everything you need to know about labor in the United States and the Great Resignation. But before I get into all of that, do me a quick favor and hit smash or destroy that thumbs up button below and ring that notification bell too. Both of those two things are completely free and they help to show me that you like this video and that you want to see even more just like it. Thank you so much for doing that, and now let's talk all about the Great Resignation and labor culture in the United States. So before I get into why exactly companies and businesses are forcing people to start returning to the office, I want to kind of go over why exactly the labor market has shifted in the United States so dramatically over the last 2 years. Well, I think a lot of workers saw that in 2020 and 2021, their labor was not being appreciated. I mean, all of your retail workers and restaurant staff that worked tirelessly through the pandemic didn't really see any extra rewards for that. I mean, a lot of them ended up getting pay raises at the end of 2021, but that was just to kind of sorta meet inflation. Those raises didn't really amount to anything. So during the pandemic, they were left with long hours and super low pay. And now that we're in the end stages of the pandemic, people are looking for something different. They're looking for something that they can be passionate about and not just for a paycheck anymore. So like I said, this Great Resignation really kind of started in 2021. Ball really got rolling in about August and September of last year and hit a record high in November. And estimates are now saying that around 30 to 40 million people quit their jobs voluntarily in 2021 alone. So workers are looking to be appreciated. I don't think that's anything new. I don't think that happened in 2020 or in 2021. I think it's always pretty much been that way. Workers have been quitting their jobs for this reason for a very long time. But the pandemic kind of added an extra layer of pressure on millions of Americans all throughout the country. That meant it was time to quit. And on top of that, workers are now looking for better pay and better benefits in a job. Better pay is also something that has always been around, and benefits have also been something that workers have looked for in a job since pretty much the dawn of time. They want their employers to kind of take some of the financial burden off of them. They don't want to have to pay for every single thing out of their own pocket, which is pretty thin to begin with because their job doesn't pay enough as it is. And like I said, employers for the most part have been giving out raises since the end parts of 2021, but they haven't really been enough to meet inflation. Inflation in February 2022 was around 7.9%, an over 40-year high. In 2021, workers saw a raise of around 4 to maybe 5%. So workers are still losing around 2 to 3% of their wages, and that's because prices in the United States are going up. When you have super high inflation, businesses have to raise their prices because people are buying so much. There's so much currency and money going around in the country that there's demand for everything. And we've definitely saw that over the last 2 years because of stimulus bills and federal programs, pauses to things like mortgage and rent payments, and also federal student loans. Those two things alone account for a big chunk of a lot of Americans' bills. So if they didn't have to pay them, they were saving a ton of money. And on top of that, the federal government was giving them thousands of dollars every single month. So that kind of covers what Americans are looking for in jobs. And some employers throughout the country are starting to give in to these worker demands. Mainly because they don't have a choice, because they're trying to meet demand for Americans right now, but they just can't because they don't have enough workers to produce products or answer phone calls or manage supply lines. All of that has meant increasing prices throughout the United States. So they're starting to give wages where it makes sense to do so for them. But now there's also something super interesting here that we need to go over, this work from home culture. Millions of Americans didn't lose their job in 2020 and in 2021. They simply changed how they were going to do their job. So instead of driving to the office every single day, the office office was sometimes their bedroom or their couch. Now, for office workers all throughout the country, this made a lot of sense, and it was way more comfortable to do so. A lot of workers preferred to stay at home because they were saving money on childcare costs. They were saving money on gas, which right now, gas is super expensive. And they were just saving time, so they didn't have to take an hour-long commute back and forth to the office multiple times a week. That means that there's more time for family and for interests. Or just anything. People have the time to do the things that they want. And that is super important for workers in general. So with all of that being said, why exactly are businesses throughout the country now forcing people to return to the office? Well, I'm gonna break this down into three main things: collaboration, real estate, and trust issues. Let's start with the first one, collaboration. This is the number one public reason why companies are saying that people need to return to the office. The fact of the matter is, you can only do so much over a Zoom call. You don't have that really quick collaboration that you can get in an office. If you have an entire office floor that's able to collaborate every single moment of the day and they're not disconnected, well, in theory, you might be able to get more done. However, you might also get less done because now you have people chatting and doing things that they want to do with their office friends. I mean, us here at the Minority Mindset, we don't have water cooler talk, we have guac talk just about every day that we're in the office. But it also means that there's a lot more transparency and ideas sharing among workers every single time that they work together. You can really build a team because that team starts to get to know one another. They're working together constantly on similar projects, and you can't really do that in an online space. I mean, sure, you can still get to know your coworkers pretty well, but the incentive to do so isn't really there. And plus, there's almost this need to complete tasks when you're in the office, because once you leave the office for the day, a lot of people don't want to work once they get back home. So office workers tend to skip their lunches or stay late so they can finish tasks. And of course, there's no real distractions at work for the most part, versus at your house, there could be millions of different distractions keeping you from getting your job done. So that's number one. Companies want to preserve that work culture that is completely office focused, and they want to continue that collaboration that you can only really get in an office. Number two is all about real estate. Now, I don't see a lot of people talking about this, but when we think about big, massive corporations and businesses, the first thing that a lot of people think of is the buildings that they own. Those buildings all throughout the country are pieces of real estate, and they have people working in them all the time. That is their office centers. That's where they make all of their big meetings and where pretty much everything else goes on in the company. But over the last 2 years, a lot of businesses have been selling off their real estate because if nobody's in the office, there's no real reason to have them. Now, this is an issue for big businesses and big corporations. These companies want to make money, and they want to make money in as many different ways as possible. And having those big chunks of real estate all throughout the country is a potential way to make more money. If you have no real estate and you have no workers in the office, then your leverage for if your company starts to go under starts to get a lot smaller. You have nothing to sell off if you want to, and you have no real control over regions because you have no real estate. I mean, think of a company like McDonald's, for instance. They are a fast food company that makes a lot of their money from their sales at their restaurant. However, their bigger profit opportunity is through their real estate. They buy locations all throughout the world, and then they charge their tenants rent. They then have that real estate investing opportunity. And whatever happens, if McDonald's decides to pivot or they need to sell a restaurant, well, they can make money off of that location because it's in a prime real estate location. I mean, just think about in your neighborhood where the local McDonald's are. The answer is probably everywhere. So businesses want to keep a stranglehold on those locations all throughout the country, and there's no real reason to have them if they're basically just not getting any input out of them. That's tough for a lot of businesses, so they want to force people back to the office so they have a reason to keep those billions upon billions of dollars worth of real estate. And then finally, number three, businesses just don't trust their employees. Now, this is something that's been going on forever, as long as we've had jobs. There has been so many companies that have installed things on their workers' computers to make sure that they're only doing work-related tasks from 9 to 5. We're talking screen shares and recordings and literal cameras that are set up in people's home offices to make sure that they're working during working hours. There's been a lot of pushback on that though, so if they just say you have to be in the office, then they can monitor you as long as they're there. I mean, personally, I think it's pretty creepy to spy on people, but some companies and corporations want to make sure that they're getting the maximum amount of output from each and every employee. So like I said, the solution is to come back to work. Now with that said though, is this just temporary for these businesses? Are we still going to see millions of people working from home 5, 10, and even 15 years from now? I mean, to me, I personally think so. I mean, you gotta think about the Great Resignation and what people are really wanting when it comes to a business. At the end of the day, people just want to be treated like people. They want to be treated like human beings that have lives outside of work. It's really tough to do that when you're in an office or working for a corporation where you're basically just a number on a spreadsheet. When you work from home, the vibe is completely different. And when you take Zoom calls from your home office, well, your boss or employer literally gets to see a small snapshot of your life. They're able to see the things that you have up on the wall. They can see pictures that you have in the background. And sometimes they can hear your dog barking or your kid asking for you while you're on a meeting. Those are all opportunities that wouldn't come up if you were in the office. And people just have a lot more time for themselves. I mean, like I said, if you're driving to the office an hour and sometimes 2 hours every single day, well, for the most part, you're not getting paid for that. So that time for a lot of people is just a complete waste of your day, when you could be spending that time sleeping in an extra hour. I mean, if you don't have to be at your desk until 9 o'clock in the morning, then you don't have to wake up till 8:45 to start your day, or 8:50, whenever you want to, pretty much. But if you have to be at your desk in an office at 9 o'clock in the morning and traffic usually sets you back by a whole hour, well, now you have to leave at 8, which means you have to wake up at 7:45 at the latest. That pretty much sucks up your entire day. And while it has pretty much been the norm for the past 50 or 60 years, that is changing now, all thanks to the pandemic. Wait, did you say thanks to the pandemic? I mean, the pandemic was a completely terrible thing for our country and countries all throughout the world. I mean, it had devastating effects for just about everyone. However, I will say one positive thing to come out of it is workers are finally getting the power that they deserve. They're sticking it to companies and corporations that have been mistreating them and not paying them right for pretty much the past 100 years. It is completely switching. Benefits are getting better, pay is starting to get better, and your work-life balance is also starting to improve. Things that workers have been asking for a very long time, but they weren't able to get it because there was traditional standards and competition in place. I mean, if you decided to quit your job for all of the things that I listed, there was always someone else that was willing to work and put up with even more because they want that job. It's a little bit different now. I mean, there are still people out there with that mindset, but now everybody is looking for the same things. I personally believe that work from home culture is here to stay. I don't see it going anywhere anytime soon, and businesses are just gonna have to accept that. Companies might start to lose that foothold of real estate, but eventually they're gonna have to let the work speak for itself. Can't spy on employees. If employees are getting the work done, then it doesn't really matter. And that collaboration can maybe meet like a hybrid model. So we have these pop-up kind of workstations showing up all throughout the country. Maybe you don't come to the office 5 days a week, but maybe you have 1 week every single quarter where you go to a particular location and meet up with your direct team that you work with. You have all of your major meetings and quarterly reports and everything that needs to happen collaboration-wise during that week. That can save the company money because they're not renting an entire building for an entire year. They only have to pay for those employees going to that particular place at certain times of the year. Or maybe even go smaller. You say 1 day a week you come to the office for a few hours to have some collaboration. I think workers would much rather have that than be forced to go to the office 5 days a week. So there's solutions is all I'm saying. It doesn't have to be completely one way or completely the other way, but I think starting that conversation is really what needs to happen right now. But now I want to hear from you on this issue. What do you think about the Great Resignation and the complete shift of labor in the United States over the last few years? Do you think that work from home culture is here to stay? Or do you think that companies and corporations are eventually going to get their way and a return to the office is almost inevitable? Whatever your thoughts are, leave a comment below before you go. But that is it for today's business and financial news breakdown. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to stay up to date with all of the top business and financial news from around the country, our team puts together a free daily newsletter, and you can subscribe to it by clicking the link in this corner right here. And if you want to stay up to date with me and everything else happening in the business and financial world, I'm putting out updates 7 days a week over here on this channel. I've actually got another one ready for you right here, so be sure to check that out before you go. That is it for me, everybody. Be kind out there, and I'll see you all in the next one.